Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Migrant Hope channel. It is me, Charlene, and yes, welcome. The essence of today's video is talking about the difference between public accounting versus industry. Now, I've been able to work in both sectors and I'll be able to tell you all the difference in case you're a college student and you're not sure which route to go, or if you're a professional either working in industry or you're working in public accounting right now and you may be considering making the jump. In this video, we're talking about public versus the industry sector, right, of accounting. Now, I would use the word industry, private interchangeably, but they essentially all mean the same. Public accounting is where you're working for like the more bigger firms, like the big fours, all of that. Private is more so, working for like a specific company. First thing that I would say is different is in public accounting, the hours are a lot more grueling. Like you are working on average 60 hours, but I would say in industry it's definitely different. Now you have busy times depending on whether it's month end, you may be working on a specific project. Depending on what it is, there are less grueling hours. You're not required to work those crazy hours all the time as it is in public accounting. So you typically would work your typical 40-45 hours. Depending on if it's super busy, it could go up to 50. And then you also want to keep in mind that it depends on the company too, because if it's like a startup versus like an already established company, there could be a lot more working hours. But in essence, overall, on majority and what we see across the board is in public accounting, the hours are a lot longer for a longer period of time. And yeah, in private, it's not so much the same. So that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind if you're considering either or. Also, the second thing is there is a lot more responsibility from the get-go when you get into industry as compared to public. Now, in public, I think maybe the reason for this is typically those of us who start in public would usually start right after college. And I think in essence, it's supposed to be like, you're just starting out, you may not have too much experience. So the growth is less quick or rapid and you don't have as much responsibility when you start. Now you may be very hungry and like a college student, you're ready to work and do all of that, but at the same time too, it's important that you take your time to learn. So I would say big difference is public, you definitely have like a less like a slower growth, but that's because they want you to be able to grasp the concepts. And I personally think maybe it's because people are just out of college too, whereas in industry you're already expected, or most of the time you will tend to get responsibilities a lot quicker because most people actually do the transition from public to industry. Not to say if you start in industry and then go to public after, you won't do well, but it doesn't mean that you cannot start in industry and transition, or it doesn't mean that you will not be successful if you start in industry and then eventually transition over to public. So my point number 3 kind of goes with point number 2 in that the exposure to work tasks and like maybe more technical accounting stuff in industry, you get that exposure a lot quicker. Multiple reasons. Now, their public accounting definitely probably has more employees, so there's a lot of ranking. You have associate, senior, manager, director, managing director. So you may not get exposure to many technical areas from the jump. Whereas if you're in industry, you tend to see those things a lot quicker. Also because you're getting more responsibility, and with more responsibility, you're getting a lot more technical accounting tasks. All right, this is another important thing. So in public accounting, the way it works is, from what I understood while I was there, right? And forgive me guys, I keep looking here instead of here. So the way it works in public accounting when it comes to promotions is, because it's a partner, because most of these public accounting firms are partnerships, as partners retire, that's how they determine how many people they're going to hire and promote. In public accounting, you have a set path of promotion. Depending on the company you work for, in some companies it's 2 years, in some companies it's 3 years, you get promoted to the next level. And then the higher you go, you may take a bit longer to be able to get to partnership, right? Which makes sense. It's not as set in stone as in public because, of course, it's based off of if there's need. People, they don't have those set requirements. Nobody's making partnership in industry, especially if it is a public company, right? So just keep that in mind. Yes, they do promote. Promotions is something which is done across the board, but just know that in private or in industry, you definitely would not have a more set path. Whereas in public, you definitely know that, okay, if I do well in 2 years, for sure I'm going to be a manager, for sure I'm going to be a senior. This is something to keep in mind, because especially knowing your personality, if you're someone who, like, you want to know exactly where you're going, at what time, what period, if I do this, what results will I get, which is how most accountants' brain work, is so that you definitely want to keep that in mind, because it's important. That's something which, you know, especially if you're switching from public to industry, always ask your interviewers during your interview processes also, so that you get an understanding, and then you also start preparing your mind so that you don't get disappointed if 3 years come by and you're not getting promoted. Now, this is another thing that I want us to keep in mind: the money, the pay, right? So public accounting, I've said this before, unless you go all the way to manager, senior manager, director, and then eventually partner, right, they don't pay as much in the starting levels. Whereas I'm sure in industry, once you start, you're definitely going to get paid a lot higher. But please just keep that in mind, that, you know, even though you're getting paid more out of school, it may not always continue like that. And with public, right, everything goes up with time. But if you need money when you're just getting out of school, you know, if money is your priority, if that's your goal, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't let anybody make you feel bad that, you know, you should not be chasing money, because why not, right? You're working so that you can be able to make money. So if you want, you know, to make quick money and something that you can make a definitely higher salary coming out of school, I would recommend maybe industry may be better, because public doesn't pay as much as industry when you're getting out of school. Eventually, my last and final point for today is work relationships and work friendships in public versus industry. Now, most people who work in public usually would have interned for that company multiple times before they actually sign their offer. So you've already met people, you've built your intern relationships, which, you know, in many cases it carries on with life. One thing I would say is a lot of my close friends are people that I met when we interned years back. Okay, let me not act like it was that many years back. But many of my close friends are people that I knew when we did our internships, and that's something which I really cherish. In industry now, it's a little bit different, because like I said, most people take the trajectory of public accounting and then eventually switch into the private sector. By this time, people have had families, people are a bit more mature, right? So developing those work friendships and relationships, it may not be as easy as, you know, when you're in public and when you're in school. So that's just something to keep in mind. When you go into industry, you should expect most of the people at this point to be like married, have children, and if you're like a fresh grad from college, you know, you may not be able to go to as many happy hours with your co-workers, because they have families and other things to take care of. Whereas, of course, if you're in public, it's different, because most of you are out of college, no responsibility at the moment in terms of kids or your family. But people are married, right, and also have children starting out. But that's just something that you want to keep in mind, because you may not be able to build those bonds as quickly as you would in public, because you've known these people for several years. You're at kind of the same stage in life. So that's just something that you definitely want to bear in mind. If it's important to you that you make friends with the people you work with, you guys hang out. And I say all of this because don't let anybody get into your head, right, that these things are not important. That's definitely something that you should consider and try to think about whether it makes sense for you to go into public versus private. I hope this video was super helpful for you all. I really enjoyed filming it. I'm using my new camera today, so I'm really excited. Yes, and I hope that you learned something from this video. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe as always, and stay tuned for our next video.